What does a 42-year-old cancer patient named Betsy Faria, a 77-year-old Alzheimer's patient named Shirley Neumann, and a 33-year-old mentally disabled man named Louis Gumpenberger have in common? They were all murdered by the same woman. All three lay dead because of her greed. But that wasn't the end of her carnage. An innocent man would spend years in prison for his wife's murder. But he did not kill her. They were all murdered by Pam Hupp. Why, you may ask? Less than $500,000. Today, we are talking about the disturbing case of Pam Hupp and the 3 dead bodies that surround her. Could she have really killed 3 people closest to her for $650,000? We're going to find out today. December 27th, 2011. It's that odd time of year between Christmas and New Year's. Kids are out of school, the weather is kind of wonky, and people are going to work, some people are not going to work, everyone's eating way too much and playing around too much, seeing friends, having fun, but it's an odd time of year. Everybody's schedule is thrown to the wind, but no one really expects murder. And that's what happened in the small town of Troy, Missouri, in 2011. Today we're talking about Pam Hupp and how she killed her friend, Betsy Faria. Now, at first, everyone thought it was the husband, because that's the way it always goes, right? It's always the husband who did it. It's kind of like it's always the butler, but it's always the husband. When a woman is killed, it's always the spouse. But in this case, they couldn't have been more wrong. And the poor husband would go to prison when he didn't kill his wife. So not only did he lose his wife, he lost his family, and he spent 2 years in prison. 2 days after Christmas, Russ Faria comes home to find his 42-year-old wife, who had been battling cancer. He finds her brutally knifed to death in the front room floor. Her wrists are slashed, she had been stabbed 50 times, and a kitchen knife was literally sticking out of her neck. In his panicked state, he calls 911 and says he doesn't know what happened. She must have committed suicide. Of course, law enforcement immediately start looking at him.
What is the address where you need this found?
130 C-Mac. My wife killed herself. She's on the floor. Oh my God.
Okay, just take a couple deep breaths for me.
Now, we all know that when someone commits suicide, they may slash their wrist, but they're not going to stab themselves 50 times, and they're definitely not going to leave a steak knife in their neck. But in a panic state, this is what Russ's mind came up with. So this is where this was the first check mark against Russ. Now, law enforcement in this area may have not been overly qualified to handle this type of murder case, but they should have been able to see that this didn't add up. Either way, they focused on Russell, and that was all they were going to look at. They weren't going to look at anybody else, but they did have one disadvantage, and her name was Pam Hupp. Now, Pam Hupp was a co-worker who worked at an insurance company with Betsy. Now, she was supposedly the good friend of Betsy, who had been driving her back and forth from her chemo and all these different appointments, and she was taking care of Betsy. Now, anyone close to her, they would think that Pam Hupp was such a good friend. But if you look closer, you're going to find a narcissistic manipulator, and that's who is going to control the narrative in this case. Now, while law enforcement could say that maybe they were misguided, maybe they didn't have a lot of training, maybe they didn't have a lot of experience, they had Pam Hupp leading the way, and she was the loudest witness against Russ. Now, she claimed that Russ and Betsy were having marriage problems, which they had in the past. If Russ didn't kill his wife, Betsy, then who did? She obviously didn't stab herself 50 times and leave a knife in her own neck. Who could have done this? Well, Pam made sure that no one looked beyond Russ. But everyone else started to get suspicious of Pam. Everyone except for the law enforcement. Even the local news started questioning the narrative that Pam provided. But it didn't matter. Once it got to court, Russ was the one that was guilty, and nobody was going to hear anything else. So what happened? Pam picks up Betsy Faria from her mother's house, where she was gathered with family and friends, playing games and having a good time. Now later, family would say that she didn't really want to leave, and that Russ was going to pick her up later. But of course, this is something the jury would never hear. 7:04. Pam starts establishing an alibi. 7:04, Pam calls her husband, Mark, and leaves a strategic voicemail on his phone, saying, "Hi, I just wanted to let you know I got Betsy home. Betsy's here. Betsy, say hi." Betsy says hi. Now, there's a timestamp of 7:04. Betsy is alive and well, and there's proof of it on Mark's phone. So if Russ didn't kill his wife, who did? Who could have done this to this sweet woman? Well, we'll find out that her good friend, Pam, is actually the murderer. You're going to find out that Pam actually stabbed her own friend 50 times and left a knife in her neck. She did it strategically because she wanted to make it look like a crime of passion. Now, this is the problem with narcissistic people. Sometimes they're smart, and sometimes they know how to cover their tracks and manipulate other people into seeing things the way they want them to see them. And that's the case of Pam Hupp. When police actually start their investigation, they immediately suspect Russ. Now, when you listen to his 911 call, he does sound hysterical. And people automatically think, oh, it's an act. Well, if someone has never seen a dead body before, if someone has never watched true crime shows way too much, if someone's not into this type of story, they wouldn't react well to a dead body. Can you imagine coming home at 9:30 at night? It's a little dark. You open the door and you find your wife, who has been brutally stabbed to death with a knife sticking out of her neck, in the middle of the floor. Now, most people would react rather hysterically to such a scene, and this man did. Now, some people use that against him, and they've overanalyzed his 911 call, saying that it was all a facade and that he had done this to his wife. Well, tragically, he did not do this to his wife, and they used his emotions against him. And that's what's sad in this society. We want men to be big and tough and strong, but we also want them to get in touch with their feminine side and be emotional. But when they are emotional, we use it against them. And this is one case where his emotions were definitely used against him. Just after 9:30, Russ comes home and finds his wife and makes the 911 call. Now, when police start to investigate, they find that Russ has no blood spatter on him. There's no blood anywhere. They can't find in the house where he has washed away the blood stains. They can't find anything in that house to prove that Russ did this, but they were going to prove it anyways. And they decided that he was going to be guilty no matter what. Now, he got home at 9:38. Investigators noticed that she was dead, she was cold, and rigor mortis was starting. So that means she had been dead for at least 2 hours. She had been dead closer to 7 o'clock. Now, you'll find out that this fits into a timeline very neatly. Think Russ is going to go on trial for his wife's murder, and you're going to think that he's going to get a fair chance at this. He has proof that he wasn't home at 7 o'clock. He has proof that he was gone to somebody else's house until 9 o'clock. See, he was at a friend's house with a bunch of guys, and they were having a good time. He did not leave that home until right at 9 o'clock, and he had a house full of people to prove that he was not home at 7 o'clock when his wife was being knifed to death. But the jury was not allowed to hear this. The jury was just allowed to hear about the past marital problems between Betsy and her husband. They were not allowed to hear how they had just recently gone on a cruise to fulfill Betsy's dream of swimming with dolphins before her cancer diagnosis took her out of this world. They didn't get to hear all of the happy moments and the good things. They just got to hear a manipulator's tale of how horrible a man was to his wife who was dying of cancer. They didn't get to hear that Russ had witnesses to prove he was not home just after 7 o'clock. They did not have any idea that he had actual receipts from where he had stopped to get food at Arby's after 9 o'clock on the way home from his friend's house. He had physical proof, and yet the jury was not allowed to hear this. Again, and I have talked about this many times on my channel over and over again, how I think we need to change our rules and regulations to not allow things to be hidden from the jury. So many of these cases that I have covered have gotten a bad outcome because the jury did not get to hear all of the information. Now, people who are watching the news, people who were watching the coverage, now the local TV channels, there was a news station that was following this, asking questions. They did a better investigation than law enforcement. And when people started to see those things, they began to question. But unfortunately, Russ would be found guilty of his wife's murder, even though he had concrete proof that he wasn't home at the time of her death. Russ would sit in jail for over 2 years before he'd ever get a chance at a retrial. And the only reason why he got a chance for a retrial is because the local news media kept asking questions. They actually interviewed Pam at her home. They stood on her front porch and talked to her through her front door. And she began to tell the story again, and it had been a little bit of time, so her details started to change. Now, this was important to these local TV investigators because they knew what she had said before, and what she said now didn't quite add up. So they began to question things. But they didn't question them hard enough or fast enough, and nobody caught on in time to save Pam Hupp's victim number 2. You see, Pam Hupp told investigators actually who she was going to kill next, and they didn't even catch it. You see, Pam Hupp, everyone wants to know, why would Pam Hupp kill her friend? Pam Hupp led it to believe that she was Betsy's best friend. So why in the world would she kill her best friend? Well, there was a $150,000 insurance policy that was changed 4 days before her death. 4 days before she died, Betsy changed the beneficiary on her life insurance policy to Pam. Pam had convinced her that Russ was bad news and that he wouldn't take care of her daughters when she died. So she convinced Betsy to give her the $150,000. She said she would put it in a trust for her daughters, and when her daughters came of age, she would make sure her daughters got the money. Now, this is what happened 4 days before Betsy's murder. 4 days later, Pam was going to get a paycheck. And she wouldn't give it to the daughters either. No, she would keep it. The daughters would eventually even take her to court, trying to fight for that money. The girls would not get the money that their mother left them. Pam would win that court case. You see, sometimes psychopathic narcissists are very convincing, and sometimes they win. During a police interview, Pam Hupp actually tells them who she's going to kill next, and they don't realize it. 4 months before her mother died, she actually told police that if she wanted money, she didn't need Betsy's $150,000 because her mother was worth $500,000. Her mother had Alzheimer's and lived in a condo. She lived on a 3rd floor room with a heavy balcony. Well, this balcony was pushed out and her mother was on the ground. They found her dead October 31st, 2013, laying on her back looking up at the sky. She had somehow fallen through this heavy railing. The top of the railing wasn't scuffed up, wasn't broken at all. She had somehow busted out the bars and fallen through. Now, this woman was 218 pounds, and she had to use assistance to walk. There's no way. She took a running leap into that fence and flew through that fence. She didn't have the strength to. Now, you'll see there was lots of investigators who questioned this. But again, they didn't do anything about it. They labeled her mother as a and went on. Why would her mother do that? They didn't have an answer. But the coroner ended up watching the newscasts about the strange behavior of Pam Hupp around the murder of Betsy Faria, and he began to question. He changed the mother's cause of death to undetermined. That would be the first sign that Pam's narrative was starting to crumble. This episode is brought to you by Chaos Rules in Madhouse, Madison County, Missouri. This rural community should be a safe place, but it hides a dark secret. Fredericktown is one of the most dangerous places to live in America. With a crime rate of 31 per 1,000 residents, Fredericktown has one of the highest crime rates compared to all communities of all sizes. I started researching one case sent to me by a desperate grandmother that led me to 15 more. Then I realized this county has had murder, corruption, and chaos since before the Wild West days. This book will start with the lynching by a Fredericktown mob in 1844 and will end up in an explosion. Hold on to your seats when you read this one. You're in for a wild, chaotic ride through rural Missouri. Check out my new book, Madhouse, Madison County, today. It had been a couple of years, and now Russ had actually got a retrial. Now, during this retrial, evidence wasn't suppressed, and the jury got to hear everything. They got to see how Russ was set up. They got to see who got the money from the insurance. They got to see it after the fact. So 2 or 3 years had passed. Now they could see the outcomes that the first jury wasn't able to see, and they acquitted Russ. Now, Russ filed a lawsuit and won $2 million for his wrongful conviction. But it didn't bring his life back. It didn't bring his wife back. Half the town still hated his guts. Betsy's family still didn't talk to him much. And now he had to try to start over again. But what was bad is Pam Hupp wasn't done with him. Pam was still ready to tie him up again. And she would try in the most unusual, bizarre way. On August 16, 2016, the police department in O'Fallon, Missouri, got a 911 call from a very strangely calm Pam Hupp.
911, where's your emergency?
Hey, hello, there's someone breaking in my house. Help!
She said that a man was breaking into her home and trying to kill her, and she literally shot him while they were on the call in 911. Now, if you listen to her 911 call, she says very calmly, "Get out of my house. I'm not going with you." He says, "Get in the car." She literally shoots him completely calm on 911 and stages it as a home invasion. If you want to see the level of narcissism in a person, check out this story with Pam Hupp. She literally uses 911 as a stage to alibi herself in the murder of an innocent man. No one knew that she had targeted this mentally challenged man, conned him into coming to her house, timed it just perfect to where she could call 911 while he was there, and shoot him live on a 911 call. She murdered an innocent man and thought she was going to get away with it. But she was dealing with O'Fallon PD. She lived 30 minutes away from Betsy Faria. She lived in O'Fallon, Missouri, with a whole different police department who didn't play games. They wasn't going to fall for her stuff this time. Louis Gumpenberger had suffered a head injury, and had some mental challenges. When police arrived on the scene to save the damsel in distress, she had already taken care of it. She had plowed Louis Gumpenberger full of bullets, live on the 911 call. Louis was gone by the time they got there. The poor man didn't have a chance. Pam couldn't dare risk the fact of letting him live and tell them the truth. She had conned him into coming to her house. Then she staged his body. You see, she was still trying to tie up Russ Faria, so she staged a hit on herself. There was a strange note and $900 found in Louis's pockets when investigators arrived on the scene. This note sounded like orders to a hitman. Someone wanted Pam Hupp dead, and someone wanted her, and someone wanted Louis to get Russ's money. Now, of course, there was only one Russ in this case, and that was Russ Faria. Pam was determined Russ was going to go back to prison, even if she had to stage a hit on herself, pay $900 cash to kill herself, and to have a poor man come in so she could kill him. She was going to win this. Well, this time, it fell through. Louis Gumpenberger was a completely innocent bystander in this case. He didn't know Pam Hupp. She had conned him into coming by her house. Here's the strange note that points back to Russ Faria. And $900. We'll come to find out that $900 came from Pam's money. I guess Pam thought it was smart to hire her own hitman and then kill him in self-defense. Pam's story quickly fell apart when another witness came forward. There was a woman who Pam had tried to set up, like Louis. She had been trolling the area a short time earlier, trying to find somebody who she can con into coming home with her. She found one young woman named Carol, and she told her that she was actually a TV producer and that she was needing someone to run a scene for her, and she would pay them $500 if she would come and film the scene at her house with her. Well, this woman was smart, and she's like, I don't think so. That sounds really weird to me. And she turned her down. Well, come to find out, Pam's plan was to kill her, but it didn't work out, so she continued hunting for her next victim until she found poor Louis. Now, Pam was convicted on Louis's murder and given a life sentence on August 12, 2019. That's also when they started reinvestigating Betsy Faria's murder. They also have started to question her mother's murder. Was her mother pushed off that balcony? Was her mother thrown through those railings? Her mother couldn't have gone through those railings any other way. As of this recording, we are still waiting to see the outcome of her mother's case. She has been convicted in Betsy Faria's murder, and she has been convicted in Louis Gumpenberger's murder. She has not been convicted of her mother's murder as of yet, but we are still waiting to hear from him. Now, the FBI says anyone who has killed 3 people can be classed as a serial killer. I contend Pam Hupp may not actually be a serial killer. She is a narcissist, she's a psychopath, but I do not think she would be classed as a serial killer. She doesn't have the psychology of that type of predator. She does, however, like money and have no regard for human life. That points more to psychopathy than anything else. My question is, once everything comes through, once everything, one of those good old Southern sayings, once everything comes out in the wash, are there more victims of Pam Hupp? Did she just kill 3 people for $650,000? Or did she kill more people? If she was still out, would she kill again? I contend she probably would, anytime she needed cash. I'll leave it up to you. Would you class Pam Hupp as a serial killer? Or would you just class her as a narcissistic, psychopathic killer? Either way, there's 3 humans that were taken out by this woman. There was rumors that the death penalty was going to be on the table if she's convicted again. What do you think? Do you think she deserves the death penalty for killing a cancer patient, her mother, and an innocent mentally disabled man? I'll leave that up to you. I try not to get into politics on this channel. I'll see you next week. Today's episode is brought to you by Bones Coffee Company. You can forget about boring coffee when you drink Bones Coffee. Not only do they offer a variety of flavors such as strawberry cheesecake and maple bacon, they are a family-owned company that puts great detail not only in their coffee, but in the artwork that comes on each individual bag. Bones Coffee has a coffee club that will deliver your favorite coffee to your door every month. If that wasn't enough, they also have some amazing swag to offer. Check out Bones Coffee Company today. I'll have my affiliate links in the show notes for you.